I had a bad dream in 4 voices.
I had a bad dream that lasted too long. That started some weeks, some months, some years, some centuries ago, of way too many people, places, things, telling me that my colored body was not good, that it had no value, that it could not be fat, too tall, too short, too skinny, telling me that bones and wheelchair bodies, bones and braces bodies, deaf bodies, and blind bodies were bodies without value, telling me that I could not be colored and queer at the same time, telling me that black and white were the only realities, and that if we were anything else, or more than one thing at a time, or God forbid, too many things, then we were doomed to be erased. Telling me that desire and sexualities were not fluid, telling me that everything had to be either or, telling me that I could not be shapeshifter or border bandit, telling me that gender was fixed and there were only two, and that male definitely equals superior, telling me that I was confused, telling me that the sharing of erotic power was wrong, telling me that I could not raise my children, telling me that I could not live and work in this country because I was suspect, telling me that I could not claim my lover's body because I was not family, telling me that my relationships did not merit recognition by law, telling me that I was wrong, that I was a shade, a shadow, a half-life, telling me that I should not be allowed to exist, telling me that I had no right to. You know what? I had a bad dream. I had a bad dream that if I escaped the razor blades and pills of my mind, I would only encounter bigger, more brutal tortures, more constant threats of violence, of annihilation, of massacre. I had a bad dream.
I had a bad dream that they would still say that there's no such thing as persecution of queers in Gold Mountain. I had a bad dream. I had a bad dream that we queers would still say that we didn't care what happened to others as long as we got ours. I had a bad dream that we would say that there's no such thing as queers who need public assistance or queers in prison, that affirmative action is not our issue. Those nasty old isms are all just things of the past. Why don't we just get on with life? After all, the playing ground is already level. Why don't they just stop dividing our movement with all of their diversity and inclusion? After all, we're all equal here on Turtle Island. We're free and happy. After all, we have no prisoners or prisoners of war or political prisoners here in the United States. Why don't they just stop whining? After all, no one suffers more than we queers. Why can't we all just get along? I had a bad dream.
I had a bad dream that we would be afraid of delighting in the dazzling display of our differences, and that instead we would run to new closets of, we're just like everyone else. New and renovated closets that would confirm our belief that different equals wrong. Condo closets that would promise equality if we but erase ourselves. Duplex closets that would close in on us and suffocate us. I had a bad dream. I had a bad dream that we would begin to believe, as we had been taught, that spirit and body did not belong together, that body was bad and colored, full of desire, needing to be policed, dominated, and controlled. Just like we have been taught that women and the earth had to be controlled. I had a bad dream that we would forget that we were the dreamers of the dream, the tellers of the tale, the keepers of the rhythm, the tribes of the moon, the people of the rainbow, a sacred people. I had a bad dream. I had a bad dream that the violence against us would increase, that in Oakland and in Richmond, in the military, in prisons, in veterans administration hospitals and on reservations, in breast cancer wards and farm towns and AIDS wards and homeless shelters, in abortion clinics and parks, in immigration detention centers and sex clubs, in shrines, in places of prayer and prostration, and mental hospitals. We could still be lynched and executed at will. Bitter fruits of a bitter tree. I had a bad dream.
I had a bad dream that once dispersed to the four directions. We would be forgotten like countless others, victims of a media whiteout, killed twice, our voices no longer heard. I had a bad dream. But now my sound is carried through you. My bad dream becomes sweet dream as you scream that there can be no renewed hope, no equality and justice for all. As long as there is no equality and justice for all of us, for each one of us, with all of our madly beautiful pieces, parts, fears, contradictions, and dreams, that there can be no postmodern, post-colonial equality and justice for all, as long as our bodies and minds are still colonized, are still kept as someone's occupied territories.
Yes.
As long as dreams are still squashed, as long as queers and Chumash and post-nuclear Pacific Islanders and Bosnians and Filipinas and women with cervical cancer and Miwoks and Yukots and Iraqis and immigrants and women with HIV and Chechnyans and Kashmiris and Filipino Moros and poor colored butch dykes and mixed blood people, drag kings and drag queens and Rwandans and Israeli refugees and people living with HIV and Palestinians and Chicanas and pagan leather queers and South Asians and people without health care. And intersex and polysex and Puerto Ricanos and transgender Sufis and black folks and sex workers and Persian Muslims and Ethiopian Jews and Tibetans and Maido and Pomo and Muslims and people with disabilities and Sri Lankan freedom fighters and prisoners and Asian teenagers and homeless people and Arabs and who knows how many others of all sizes, shapes, colors, and combinations of all the above and then some continue to be made erased, continue to be suffocated, continue to be killed. You are my sweet dream. Through you I live on, from generation to generation, from everlasting to everlasting, and fiercely, proudly, tenderly, queerly, I come home to, run to, fly, to float, to shout, to say no more nightmares.